Final hour overdrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Bryan Hayes, Dave Feschuk, and Al's brother, who's just revealed the worst take in the history of the show.
I would like for you to refer to me as Al's brother, if you would.
Well, no, I can't do that because you hate Hulk Hogan.
Actually, that's true.
That's right.
That's true.
You have John Cena ahead of Hulk Hogan in your Mount Rushmore debate when it comes to wrestling, which is... Like, I thought you might maybe say, okay, Ric Flair I'd take out, maybe, which I think would have been absurd as well.
Flair as well.
You'd put Cena ahead of Ric Flair. So where is he on your list then?
3. I told you. So I've got him at 3. Number 3.
Austin?
Behind Austin and The Rock, and then Cena.
Yeah, John Cena at number 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Joe from the Bridge does not agree. Joe's got Hulk, Flair, Rock, Undertaker, Stone Cold ahead of Cena. And then the list goes on. He's got Bret Hart ahead of Cena. He's got Shawn Michaels ahead of Cena. He's got maybe Triple H ahead of Cena.
Okay.
This is a flush take, man.
Yeah, listen, you're younger than us, and you do have some support. Some guy writing in saying you gotta fire these other goofs who are goofing on John Cena.
Okay.
Because Cena's the man. And
someone else, Al's brother's on the money with the Cena take. I don't know what you fellows are arguing about. He's a cultural icon and the face of WWE in this century, which started in 2000. Which is he? When those two were...
I don't think so. I mean, Austin and The Rock
he came in 2002.
Yeah, I know, but Austin and The Rock were still like the man.
Here's the
back
thing
then.
with Austin, and this is where I can't believe we're getting into some hot wrestling
and
talk.
let's try to keep it on the rails here,
we
please.
will. But like, he was only around for a few years. That's the thing. He didn't have the longevity. Same with Rock. Like, those guys didn't necessarily have the longevity that the Takers and the Cenas and the Flairs had.
So
right?
he was like the Gale Sayers or something, or like Eric Lindros, Cam Neely type?
Yes,
That's
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Like, when you factor in the longevity
matters
what
to
he
you.
did, for sure it
Yet
does.
Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, who have the definition of longevity,
yes,
they're excluded from
And
your list.
essentially built the sport
Yeah.
into what it is.
Yes. Like Ric Flair you gotta love Ric Flair, man.
Of course, everyone loves him. Limousine riding,
He's
kiss
the best.
But he wasn't
100%.
anywhere near as big as Hulk Hogan.
No, Hogan was the king.
Hogan was the king.
Obviously, you weren't alive in 89 when they came here for WrestleMania 6.
My introduction.
I was there, and there's not. I would say the Ultimate Warrior would be ahead of John Cena.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, I'm putting the Warrior there.
Is the Warrior there?
Warrior in his
Warriors.
run. Who has the better run? John Cena.
Well, obviously the Warrior. Nothing beats the Warrior's run towards the ring. Nothing beats it.
Cena's got a great iconic
Does he?
run.
Okay. And I admit, I haven't been in wrestling in this century. Like basically the year 2000 hit, I was like, I'm out of here.
You're an adult now.
Yeah, I was. There were other things that were more compelling to me.
I may have been out like 89.
Yeah, that's kind of when I hung a left and I said that's enough for me.
Yeah.
So, admittedly, I did not follow Cena, and I don't know enough about him. I know he's popular and all that kind of stuff, but
I waited 4 hours in the rain for his autograph. They used to have that WWE store down Niagara Falls.
Mm-hmm.
I waited 4 hours in the rain
Was it
for
worth
a meet
it?
and greet autograph.
Get it?
A 10-year-old Al's brother? Absolutely.
It was worth it for you.
You got it.
Yeah.
Which
I got
parent
it.
had to wait with you? Was it
My
your
mom was there for sure. I can't remember if my dad. I would imagine they both probably went with me.
Was it worth it to them?
Well, it might have been worth it to them just because they knew how happy I was.
Okay.
Like,
He does a lot of great stuff, like Make-A-Wish and all that kind of stuff. Like he's really, really famous and well-regarded in that area. But
he's got star quality.
Yes, he does.
I mean,
shout out to John Cena.
He was just on the
Maybe
big
he's number
show.
10 on the list.
I mean,
I'm not saying he's
that-
on the top, outside of the top 25 or anything, but not in the top 4.
I don't know if he's in the
Come
top
on.
4. I guess it's generational.
Yeah, there
it's
you go.
like,
Could be.
post 2010.
See, this
Mount
is where,
Rushmore.
That's the thing. You lose me when you start getting these different generations. I can't tell if I'm being punked or not here because someone's writing in saying Barry O and Iron Mike Sharp belong in the Rushmore before Cena. I'm like, are those real guys or am I being punked here?
I don't.
And meanwhile, I just read it. Maybe I shouldn't have.
A lot of strong takes on the
Iron Mike
X.
Sharp.
Like, there's a lot of strong wrestling takes.
All right.
I was saying there's two things that get people fired up in the world: great food debates and wrestling. Those get people fired up.
Yep, they certainly do.
This was, in a lot of ways, El's brother, this was a brisket take, high ceiling take.
Yeah.
Very controversial.
And listen, you're not alone. Like, there's a lot of people saying, send that bad boy.
There you go.
Send that
I
tweet.
mean, you definitely inflamed a lot of people here. Like, you've got people talking.
All right. Okay.
I like that.
I like it. All right. Best bets coming up later in the hour. It was officially announced today. Scotty Barnes signing that extension. Emmanuel Quickly signing his deal, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, and the two of them are going to be pillars for this team, Barnes in particular. And Masai was speaking earlier this afternoon, and he said he's guaranteeing they're going to win again. Now, we couldn't decipher. Does that mean he's guaranteeing a championship or just, 42 wins or more?
More than 25?
Yeah, exactly. How should we interpret that statement? Well, let's bring in Josh Lewenberg, our TSN Raptor reporter, and maybe you can interpret that for us, Josh. Was that a championship guarantee from Masai or just more than 25 wins in the future?
Yeah, probably best to keep it vague right now. Masai knows what he's doing. Yeah, we've heard this before, right? We will win in Toronto, and there were promises made, although it's less clear when those promises will actually be delivered. And that's the point here, is that, there's little doubt what this organization's goal is. And unlike a lot of organizations, not just in the NBA, but in professional sports, I think the Raptors have made it pretty clear over the years that at least in terms of their long-term vision, they are committed to winning and chasing championships and also doing the other financial things that professional sports organizations like to do. But there is generally a long-term vision here. The question is okay, well, how do you get there? And I do think today was a step, if not in the right direction, then certainly in a direction, committing to these two guys. It's a lot of money, but these are two players that, despite, I would say, somewhat brief and incomplete resumes to this point in their young NBA careers, the Raptors feel confident that this is the duo that is going to lead them into whatever comes next. And yeah, I mean, symbolically, this was big for the Raptors, and you couldn't miss the symbolism because it was everywhere. The branding, the signs, the future is now, future starts now.
The future starts here. That was their big logo. It starts here.
But that is, I think, the question that was on everyone's mind today is, okay, well, how long is it going to take for the future to really get here in terms of seeing that tangible progress result in wins and maybe eventually a championship?
Yeah, and we discussed this earlier that I guess what was kind of announced today, and I think if you just compare and contrast their roster to other rosters in the East and at the bottom of the West, the idea of them tanking and being one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the league probably just isn't possible. Unless they suffer injuries again like they did down the stretch. And you can manipulate your roster at the end of the year and basically find losses. If you get bad enough, you take pieces out, it can happen. But if you look at where Detroit is, Brooklyn's all in on a full-blown tank. Washington's terrible. Charlotte's not that good. It kind of feels like the Raptors, even if they feel like they need to draft more and they would be in their best interest to be lower in the lottery next year. If these guys play and they're healthy, that's probably not a reality for them. Is that how you see it?
I see both sides of it where, I agree that the most likely outcome is probably something like what we saw last year, where they're sort of in that no man's land where they're not competing for a playoff or maybe even play-in spot, but they're also not bad enough to completely bottom out. And remember, this is a team that was really, really bad, losing 19 of their last 22 games, but it was too late to out-tank the aggressive tankers, and that might be what happens here too, where it's you've got a few teams, you mentioned them, that are going to get a head start on tanking. And even if the Raptors decide, to your point, that, okay, well, trade deadline comes along, they're not in a great spot, maybe they've got some injuries, maybe they decide at that point that they want to trade Jakob Poeltl, which is something that, by the way, I've heard that they're considering right now, that they've at least discussed internally, but they're nowhere close in terms of actual trade discussions at this point. So maybe that lingers into the regular season. And that's a dangerous game to play. It's one that the Raptors like to play, where they walk the line and have the flexibility to pivot in different directions as they see fit. But as we've seen over the last few years, is if you're too late to do that, that could really burn you. And in this case, if you decide in the last month or two of the season that, okay, well, now's the time to lose games, you might end up in that murky middle. The other side of it is that, with the lottery odds flattened over the last few years, as we've seen, you don't have to necessarily be in the bottom 3, bottom 4, bottom 5 to have a shot at that first overall pick or even a top 5 pick, and this is supposed to be a loaded draft. If anything, that's why their reluctance to really bottom out in the year of Victor Wembanyama was really frustrating, because all you really want is a shot at that top pick. You don't necessarily have to be the worst team in the league. But I do think that in a way we might be overrating these guys, where, like, yes, Scotty Barnes is a really good player. If he takes another step this year, he's going to be an even better player. But a lot of those teams that you mentioned, those young teams, have some really good players too. San Antonio was terrible this year. They had one of the best young players in the league in Victor Wembanyama. This is going to be a really young team, and I don't see any additions or upgrades coming in the near future. So I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains. And, yeah, I think they're going to be a whole lot closer to the bottom of the standings than they are going to be to the top this year, however things go over the next few months.
So let's talk about that prospect of maybe trading Jakob Poeltl. Obviously, a very controversial acquisition a couple of years back when Masai Ujiri bought at the trade deadline instead of selling, and, of course, paid for it this year, watching that pick go to San Antonio. Josh, like, what do you see the upside to moving Poeltl out now after you spent so much to bring him in?
Well, there's the path to tanking right there. If they want it, that's what it is. He's basically the only tradable piece on this team in terms of, like, somebody that has value and that is contributing to winning, that you can move for something, because everyone else, for the most part, they're in their early to mid-20s and are part of the future of this team. Poeltl doesn't fit that window. So if you want to move someone, it's Poeltl. I do think, like, he makes a big difference, probably bigger than most people realize. And we were reminded of that last year as he got hurt and was out of the lineup, and the defense completely fell apart. And the counter argument is, well, Scotty Barnes missed a lot of those games too. But even before Scotty had the hand injury, Poeltl missed time with, I believe it was a back issue at that point, and the team went like 1-9 or something like that over that period of time. So I do think, even with Barnes and some of the other intriguing young players that the Raptors have, if you subtract this team's only real rim protector, only real interior defender and a hub on that side of the ball, like that's your path to really bottoming out. But I agree with you. Like, the question is, first of all, are they willing to do it? And two, what are you going to get back? As far as I understand, and this should surprise nobody, Masai Ujiri's asking price on Poeltl is really high right now, and obviously that's been the case before with him and his guys, is that he asks a lot for them. And part of it, I think, as you mentioned, Dave, is that they traded for him at a time when a lot of people didn't think they should trade for him. They gave up a first-round pick for him. So at minimum, you've got to get the first-round pick back in order to save face and justify this. And you're probably looking for more in order to say that this was worthwhile in the long run. So I'm not sure that they're going to get that right now. His value has always been tough to gauge, because he is a throwback big man in a league that's kind of moved away from those types of players. There are teams that have a need for him, maybe less so after some team like OKC went out and signed Hartenstein. But just based on what I'm hearing, while it's something that they've considered and talked about internally, I would be really, really surprised if we saw it happen over the next few months. Maybe it's something they revisit during this season.
Yeah, more than likely at the trade deadline or leading up to it. But that will be a sign of them fully embracing that whatever happened in the past stays in the past, is Masai getting over the embarrassment of trading him for something of lesser value.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the smart play. Like, just cut bait, move on. You know, you don't give them away for free, but Poeltl doesn't match where they are with everyone else. And to your point, if they're going to be bad anyway, and I agree with your assessment, like I don't see this team being competitive at all. I think it could be a really ugly season, and it could be that much uglier, and that's probably in your best interest. Just chew on it. You're going to have to. You went through it last year. You're going to have to do it again this year, probably again the year after that. Like, this is probably 2-3 years of awful seasons before hopefully they make that turn. But you can't expedite that. And you made the deal. It was a dumb deal. They shouldn't have done it. I think Masai knows that. It's nothing against Poeltl. Poeltl's a good player.
He's a good player.
Poeltl didn't choose to get traded up here, but they made the deal. If the future really does begin today, then it doesn't matter if you don't get exactly the same value back. You got to make the right move for the process. And I think moving on from Poeltl before his value maybe dips even more, they got to consider that, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, because they just lived it with Pascal Siakam specifically.
Right.
I'm of the same opinion here, and I've been saying this for a while, is that the Raptors were so reluctant to rebuild. They should have done it earlier. They're here now, and now that they're here, you've got to see it through and make the most of it. And you can't rush it, to your point, because what are you rushing it for? To get back to where you were when you tore this thing apart as an average play-in caliber team? If the goal truly is to compete for championships, and I believe Masai when he says that, is you've got to rebuild in the right way. We've seen what that looks like in the NBA historically, but especially over the last few years. And a team like Orlando is a good example of like rebuilding properly, but OKC is probably the gold standard here. And as painful as things probably felt there for a couple of years as they were among the worst teams in the league, like that was a pretty well-executed rebuild. It cost them 2 seasons, I would say, before they started to turn the corner. But what did they do there? I think that's worth studying, and I'm sure Ujiri and Bobby Webster have done that. They bottomed out. They were really bad for a couple of years, as I said. They shut Shea down early both seasons, right? Like, and that's something that it's tough with Scotty because he just signs this extension. The amount, the salary on the deal is contingent on whether he makes all NBA this year. It's the difference between 25% of the cap, $224 million over the 5 years, or 30% of the cap, $270 million over 5 years. So if he's even in the conversation for all NBA, which I think is a long shot, but if he's even in the conversation, shutting the guy down at any point would cause some serious problems with your relationship with him. So that's a difficult conversation to have. But the great thing about Shea and what he did in OKC is he really bought into the long-term plan there, kind of endured the rough seasons. They got some really good picks in some really good drafts, and they hit on them. And now they're one of the best teams in the league and figure to be in the championship conversation for years to come. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really of the opinion that that's the type of rebuild that the Raptors have to be looking at here. Easier said than done, but the alternative, and we've seen examples of that, is a really long and painful rebuild where the two guys you just spent $400 million on will probably get pretty impatient pretty soon. And as we've seen in the NBA, is just because you sign a 4 or 5 year deal with a team does not mean you're going to be spending the 4 or 5 years with them. So the clock starts now. They've got to get moving on turning this rebuild into something bigger and better.
With Josh Lewenberg, and you know, Scotty's in a position here where I don't think we've had anyone in a position like this probably since like Chris Bosh early in his career, where even when DeMar was coming into his own, like Kyle arrived at the same time, and the two of them kind of grew up together. And then when Kyle left, Van Fleet was here. When Fred left, Siakam was here. Like now we're back to a kid being the face and the voice and really the selling point of the organization, you know, in large ways. And that's going to be different. Like we haven't seen this. Like Bosch came in 2003. They made that turn. Colangelo arrived. You know, they hire Sam, or they kept Sam. They bring in TJ Ford. They bring Anthony Parker, Garbajosa to come over, and that kind of launched them into they're actually a pretty good team here, and Chris is a big part of that. But over the last decade or so, like largely it's been guys into their mid to late 20s, early 30s. There's been veterans around to augment them, augment that in terms of taking the heat off. I don't see that here. So I guess what I'm getting to, Josh, is Scotty Barnes prepared for the off-the-court responsibility of being the man? And sure, you're going to have some vets around that can help him out to an extent. You know, Garrett Temple's coming, but those guys aren't. No one's talking to those guys. Like it's basically Scotty. RJ will take up some of it too, and Barrett's very comfortable in that role. But Scotty's the man. Like it's been determined. You're the man. You've been paid for it. You've been here now for, a couple of years. Do you think you get, being around him, that his personality is prepared for that?
Not really. I mean, I asked him that question today. I had a chat with him that you can watch on TSN.ca. I asked him if he's ready for that responsibility and if he's feeling the pressure of it. And I actually liked the answer, to be fair, is he said that he is ready for it, he embraces it, and he doesn't feel the pressure. And that's what you want to hear. But at the same time, like, we saw him in this role, small sample size after Siakam got traded last year, but we saw him in this role, and I would say generously the results were mixed. There was definitely growing pains, as you would expect from a 22-year-old in that role for the first time. But I do think, like, we've seen a significant culture shift in this organization. It's not just a buzzword. Like, it's something that you can feel being around the team, that you can see, that Masai Ujiri has sensed for a long time now. And unfortunately, like, the Barnes situation that you just described is, I think, largely responsible for the culture shift through no fault of his own. Just that, one, it's a different generation of player, and growing up in this era of player entitlement, I think kind of breeds that a little bit. But then also, like, it's a different situation. It's a different background that he's coming into as an NBA player. It's the 4th overall pick, highly touted. And I'm happy that you made that comparison with Bosch and Carter, because, yeah, like that's kind of what this feels like, where the organization has to prove something as opposed to the player having to prove something. Because for a long time, it was the guys you mentioned, Lowry and DeRozan, and then Siakam and Van Vliet. These are all guys that were either, like, drafted in the mid to late first round. In the case of Van Vliet, not drafted at all. Maybe they've bounced, in Lowry's case, bouncing around a little bit early in his career. People are doubting him. And the player had to prove something, not the organization. I think, like, especially with the timing of the We the North campaign, like, that just became the DNA of the organization, this chip on their shoulder, guys that have something to prove. And now it's kind of changed in the way that you might expect. But how do you build it back up? Probably not to that level, but to something that is going to build a winning culture. And then speaking to Masai Ujiri today, like, they're certainly hoping with all these young guys that there is a different kind of hunger, at least a youthful enthusiasm. But yeah, I'm skeptical, as I'm sure a lot of people are, and we need to see this play out. And it's really tough to build those habits and to build that culture in an environment like the one that I think a lot of us are expecting, where they're going to lose a lot of games in the short term.
Yep, absolutely. But the future starts here. We'll see what comes of it.
Now.
It starts right now. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Talk soon. Josh
Lewenberg, our TSN Raptor reporter, on the signings becoming official today, Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly. And yeah, that is going to be different. Like, you were covering the team when Bosch showed up, and when, like, he got here, it was, you know, Vince was still around, but you knew that was transitioning. It was done.
Yeah.
And then it was, you know, they obviously win the lottery. Bargnani came in 06, I believe it was.
Yeah.
They win the division in 07 in kind of shocking fashion. And yet it was like, all right, Chris, you're the guy. And there's no one, you know, there's other guys around, but it's basically you're the hope.
Yeah.
And then when, you know, DeMar was drafted, it wasn't like you're the hope. He had to grind and battle his way into his role. By then Kyle arrived. They were kind of a package deal. Obviously, when Kawhi's here, you know, Van Vliet, et cetera, these guys were kind of established, and they're always like partnerships. It was Fred and
you're right,
and Siakam.
Yeah, this is different.
Now it's like it's Scotty. Like, you're the guy.
They tried to package it as a partnership
with Quickly.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's interesting that they did
but
that.
I don't think it doesn't register.
I don't think it does.
They're not on the same level.
No, you're not. I mean, Quickly, I think they'd love to see him play into that role. They're invested in him, and they like him, and I like him, and I'm curious to see how he continues to grow. But he's not on that. He's not on. It's not Kyle and DeMar here.
Well,
like Quickly, and even RJ, if you want to include him, Scotty's on a different level, and he needs to be prepared to be treated that way, and see how he's going to handle it.
And if you look at the contracts, one guy got an extra 50 sheets.
Yes.
Over the other.
Right.
Like, that'll tell you.
Any rookie of the year, an all-star.
Yeah.
And to Josh's point, he's got that. You know, if he gets the All-NBA thing, then it turns into an even bigger contract. And
He's getting his teammates to help him on that, too.
Right? He threw out the number of what they're spending on those two, $400 million on those two players.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's a big investment. And look, Masai said it last year at the end of the year. He was asked, is Scotty ready for this? And he said, I don't know. Like, we don't know. How do we know? He's 22 years old.
Big gamble.
Yeah. But I don't love the odds sometimes. Like, when you think about the fact that this guy had a falling out with the salt of the earth that is Fred VanVleet. Like they didn't get along.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me nervous.
Yeah.
You know?
You would think Messiah would be aware of that.
Maybe that's sort of the John Cena, Hulk Hogan divide there.
It very
I don't
well
know.
could be. Two
where the
different
younger
generations.
Generational divide.
And the older generation don't quite see eye to eye on certain things. And
That's
it's just hard
possible.
to find the chemistry. And so you got a problem, right? You got discord. And so now, will Scotty be a guy who can get along with everybody else? And will it not be a problem that he's got a bunch of younger teammates that he gets along fine with? Maybe that'll be the case.
Yeah, and you got to afford him the growth and the pathway. And listen, the team's not helping him right now because they're not that good.
No.
You know, he doesn't have a lot of help around him. And, you know, you got to coach in Darko who's a year into the gig, and he had growing pains his first year. Like, he's got to keep growing as a coach. And that's kind of the story. It's just an interesting juxtaposition to an extent where Ujiri is so established like within the market, but also within the NBA. And then basically everyone else is just trying to find their footing or trying to establish themselves. And I don't know. We'll see if it works.
Well, and you got like these little minor embarrassments too. Like, well, maybe not so minor. Like last year, you get, Jonte Porter banned from the NBA for life for betting against himself.
Yes,
as a member of the Raptors.
Absurd.
And then now you got this guy Sasha Vezenkov who doesn't want to play for the Raptors.
Mm-hmm.
And they just traded for him with Sacramento, former EuroLeague MVP. He's a 6'9" power forward, small forward, whatever you want to say, swing forward, shoots it well, prototypical Euro guy that could help. And he's saying, I'd rather play with Olympiacos
threatening
than
to go
Toronto.
to Europe. Yeah.
Now, this happens a lot with European players, especially Greek players, and the Raptors have no interest in letting him go to Europe because it would be a dead cap hit if they waived him. And it's a lot of technicalities, but it's a little embarrassing. It's not quite Alonzo Mourning not reporting.
I was going to say.
It's not quite Alonzo Mourning not
Dragic
reporting
did
after
a couple years ago, too.
Yeah.
Dragic
There's
after
some
the Lowry
deja
deal.
vu coming back.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. You start referencing the Bosch era, and
That's right.
It's like Raptor fans who have been around. They're like, man, it's starting to. There are some moments where you're like, it's feeling that way.
Yeah,
again.
like you're being made a mockery of by players who shouldn't have that power.
Exactly. They have no right to look at you in any fashion other than thank you for the opportunity.
Grateful.
And I think that's why they love Quickly so much because he's embraced it so much.
Bought in.
Right
away.
from New York, Knicks, good team. He knew I'm not playing ahead of Brunson, but he comes up here and he's embraced it immediately. It's like, love being here, love the attitude, love the vibe. I'm signing, I'm here. RJ's obviously handled it beautifully, like you would expect. Scotty, by all accounts, on board. That's, there's value to that. But, yeah, they got to avoid that. And there's cycles in sports. Listen, they had an unbelievable run of a decade where from like 16 through 23, maybe even before that, like 14 through 22, 23, like that was a really good run.
Oh, incredible.
Great run. And they were a playoff team every year, and they were a formidable team every single year. And then it culminates in a championship. And COVID hit, and guys aged out, and guys left, and there's turnover. That happens. So you got to bite the bullet. This is their time to go the other way, and you're going to filter out. Go talk to the Lakers. They've had to do it. The Lakers do it.
Yeah.
The Knicks do it all the time. The Bulls do it. The Celtics had to do it. Every team has to do it. They're having their moment. The Spurs, after 20 years, they've had to do it. So it's not as if they're being... they're here we go, purgatory because it's the Raptors. That's not it. That's just the cycling of sports. But you have to embrace this is where you're at, and you got to get it right to get out of it.
Yeah, and you
That's
just got
the
to
thing.
hope, and you got to cross your fingers that the guy you pick can be the guy.
Is the right guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And that goes across the board. The coach is the right guy.
Right.
All the players are the right guy, and specifically the stars. And the quicker you get out of it, but if you do it right, and it culminates in another decade of success, then everyone's going to be ecstatic about that. So we'll see. The future starts here. We'll see.
Paul George clip today, by chance?
Yeah, so we can play that. We'll try to slide that in. We always knew that was the case, that the Clippers, that the Thunder were basically using the Raptors as leverage to make sure the Clippers
That's
paid.
what Masai felt like.
He sniffed that out.
He felt like there was no chance Paul George was coming to Toronto. It was all a
with
leverage
Russell
play.
Westbrook. And if there's truth to that, my view on that is that makes me even more disappointed with Kawhi Leonard. If there's truth in that, you just won a championship and you'd rather break that up for Paul George to come up here? Like, what do you need Paul George for? You just won.
I know. They would have been the favorites.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, if there's truth in that Kawhi was cool with either one, as long as Paul George, it wasn't LA, it was George, which I don't believe for a second. But if it was Paul George was the guy Kawhi really wanted to play with, as opposed to being in LA versus Toronto.
Hey,
What a
man,
stupid take.
It's BS.
It's gotta be.
We know what that negotiation was all about. It was Kawhi Leonard and his uncle Dennis shaking down NBA owners
Yes.
for what the commissioner himself termed as deals outside the salary
Right.
cap.
And to get to LA.
Right.
Like they wanted to be in
Yeah.
LA. They were going to LA.
And what do you know? The richest owner in North American sports ended up getting him.
And he screwed it up.
Yeah,
And guess who won in that? Oklahoma City.
that's right.
What a deal they made.
Shea.
Yep.
And
The
guess
rest
who
of
also won? Kawhi. He's got 3 contracts since then.
And hasn't won a thing in
Hasn't
LA.
won, but he's won in
Right.
the bank.
And no more
Yes, he
Paul
has.
George.
Yeah, and no more Paul George. Now he's been disrespected. He's on to Philly. All right, Matthew Scianitti. Canada, Argentina tomorrow night. We'll tee it up next. All right, Canada, Argentina tomorrow night. Cannot wait for this match. It was an incredible match on Friday against Venezuela. And this will be round 2 against the Argentinians. And we know what happened in the first game of the group stage. And yet, we got news from our buddy Matthew Scianitti that the Argentina side is staying in the Jets locker room. I think that's a huge boost for Canada and should have an effect on the odds, positively swinging towards Canada. Let's head down there now and ahead of the match tomorrow. Here's our main man, Matthew Scianitti, our TSN Soccer reporter. I think that's substantial, Matthew. What do you make of that? That Argentina's warming up and I guess getting ready where the Jets get ready.
Well, Hayes, as many will know, I am a long-suffering Jets fan. I have been to MetLife many times to watch the Jets lose many different ways.
Yeah.
So when I found that out, I was like, if you're a Canadian soccer fan, I had to put that out there because that's a tidbit of information. Knowing how good Argentina is as a team, the talent that they have, obviously Canada saw it in that first game. You got to take every little bit you can get, Hayes. And if that's an omen Canadian fans want, that's not a bad one.
I like it. I'm running with it. I think it's a very good sign for tomorrow night. And, the guys, they've been speaking positively throughout the tournament. I heard Richie Larea say yesterday that they're a different team than they were when they first faced Argentina a couple of weeks ago, and they're going into this with belief. You're there talking to these guys. You're witnessing it firsthand. Are you buying that belief?
Yes, I am. And I want to make something clear. Tomorrow is significant because the whole world is going to be watching. And this is Argentina's tournament. And this is a team that doesn't disrespect Canada, but is only worried about winning. And just in their media availability today, you could feel it. And it was packed. And it felt like a World Cup availability. Like, this game matters. And Jesse Marsch and his team know that. And he said it after that quarterfinal penalty shootout win over Venezuela that they might play their best game. They'll have to play their best game, and it still might not be good enough. And they understand that. Maxime Crépeau can make, as he did in that first game, an incredible amount of saves. And Jakob Poeltl can keep what he's doing and running and causing havoc. And Alphonso Davies could be he could be incredible and have a moment that he did against Real Madrid in the Champions League semifinal and scoring an incredible goal. And it might not be enough, because this is Argentina, and they are the defending champions. But the one thing Canadians who are going to be watching this team for the first time are going to learn, this team doesn't back down, and that's why they've been confident all tournament.
Yeah, they've definitely shown that, Matthew. I mean, I wanted to ask you about going back to that opening game against Argentina and the gamesmanship and swagger that the defending World Cup champions, led by Messi, sort of showed, especially coming out at halftime, really late, kind of dawdling while the Canadians were standing on the pitch, waiting, tapping their watches. It wasn't long after that the Argentinians broke it open. I don't know how much of a factor, Argentina's sort of cock in the walk as they sort of took their time getting back on the field had to do with them winning that game. But what do you think Canada can do to counteract that?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Feschuk, because that is a confidence and a cockiness that you earn being the Copa America champions and being the World Cup champions. Remember, Argentina is going for history tomorrow. Only since that Spanish team that won the Euros in 08 and then the World Cup in 10 and then the Euros in 12 are the only men's international team to win 3 straight tournaments, major international tournaments. And that cockiness, when I was watching Lionel Messi walk in after Canada, was giving it to Argentina as good as they were getting in that first half, in that first game. It was, and I mentioned to you guys this before, that Messi was looking at his teammates going, what is going on? Canada is bossing us in parts of this game. What are we doing here? And they came out and Julian Alvarez scores in 4 minutes. And that confidence, that cockiness of, okay, you've shown us what you can do. Now let's see what you can do. And that is something that in international football, Canadians are going to learn. And in a way, they're developing their own sense. I could see it against Venezuela. I can tell you that was the craziest game I've ever seen live and been able to work, had the pleasure of working. When Venezuela scored, it was more than 50,000 people in there. They were throwing their beers all over the place, and they were going crazy, and Canada managed it. They were relaxed and said, okay, we've seen what you can do now, and Canada had the run of the play at the end of that game and probably should have won in regulation. And then they had the calmness to go in that penalty shootout in which they have not been in that situation before and deal with it. So when you talk about counteracting that, Dave, it is Canada just has to be who they are. And it's almost like, yeah, let's go swing for swing. Let's go punch for punch. Let's see what we can do. Because is there a scenario where Canada wins tomorrow? Sure. Do I know what it is? No. And I'm not even sure. Maybe deep down, knowing all of the things that Jesse Marsch has done in terms of tactics and pressing and counter pressing, I'm sure he's looking at situations and going, again, to repeat myself, we might not have it all, but we're going to give it. And I know we've been talking about the fact that this team has to get over moral victories and have to change their attitude. They showed a lot in that Venezuela game, and they're going to have 2 more games in this tournament. Even if they lose tomorrow, they will go to the third place game, and they will feel like they've got a shot against either Colombia or Uruguay to win a medal. And that cockiness, that confidence, that calmness is what Canada has to maintain when they're at a stage like this.
Well, and the fact that, we're speaking about the team this way, going into Argentina, having a legitimate chance. They believe they got a legitimate chance to win this thing. And Jesse Marsch has only been at the helm for a couple of months here. Like, how impressive is it to you?
It's crazy. It's crazy that he's only been this is his 7th game in charge. And really, I think that comes down to when you look at what the men's team has done. And all the credit in the world to John Herdman to build them into a brotherhood, and all the good feelings that push them to the 2022 World Cup. But the fact is, like, you're getting to a point now where they needed a coach to come in and say, I have the resume. I've coached a young Erling Haaland. I've coached in the Champions League. I've coached in the Bundesliga. I've coached in the Premier League. And I'm going to push you to new levels. And these players have bought in, because if they didn't, Canada would not be here. So we're still in that honeymoon period, and there's a bunch of good feelings. And there is a scenario tomorrow where Canada has an opportunity to win, and maybe Jesse Marsch makes a mistake, and you have to ask some serious questions. But we're in that, touchy-feely, good feeling realm of like, okay, you know what? They're playing with house money, and they know it. And talking to Ismail Kone, he just had a smile on his face when he was talking about Jesse Marsch. He's talking about all the things that Canada has built in the last 2 months with him, a new coach, and he was saying, listen, we're at a point where I don't stress about stuff. And we know we're going to be facing, a reporter asked him, what's it going to be like facing 80,000 Argentines tomorrow? And he kind of corrected the reporter. And this kid's like 21 years old, looked at her and said, no, it's going to be 82,000 Argentine fans. So the confidence that Jesse Marsch has come into this job with, his players are feeling it.
With Matthew Scianitti ahead of the semifinal Copa America tomorrow night, Canada, Argentina, and I've got ESPN up here. You can find the same thing on TSN. Tomorrow, there are 2 matches around the world people will be focusing on. The semis of the Euros is Spain versus France, and the semis of the Copa America is Argentina versus Canada.
It's crazy.
It's wild.
Crazy.
Yeah,
it's wild.
It really is wild.
And I think the Canadians can feel good about something regardless of the result tomorrow. This run in this tournament has primed the country in a way for what it will see the first game of the 2026 World Cup when Canada walks out of BMO Field, whomever they're playing against. And this team is the one thing it's not bothered them. It's just something they've had to face. They've said it over and over again. They are not overwhelmed by opposition fans. I have seen things, heard things. It has been crazy. Copa America is an amazing event to just see the passion and devotion that people in other nations have for this game. But Canada's going to be learning a little bit about what it means for the world to watch it, and that brings that kind of joy. And the World Cup's only 2 years away, and Canada and that energy around the team is in a much better place now than it was, even heading into that Copa America playoff, where it was like people were clueless as to what Copa America even was. And now it's completely 180-degree difference. So this only really bodes well for the men's national team heading into 2026.
With Matthew Scianitti. So Friday night when they go to penalties, the unfortunate goal they give up in the second half where they were overly aggressive. We know it went in. It was a bad goal. But I thought Canada outperformed Venezuela. I thought they were the better team. I think they deserved to win that game. But it gets to penalties. You're in the building. they had opportunities to put that away quick, too. Like, Venezuela continued to give them opportunities to take off. And then all of a sudden, the switch flipped, and it was on the foot of Davies to push the penalties forward. He ends up scoring a beauty. You mentioned Kone. He ends up closing it. Ice cold reaction to it, which I thought was really, really cool. But take us inside that stadium, because there's so many millions of Canadians obviously watching it. Now it's become a really famous moment that we're going to remember for a long time. How nerve-wracking was it to just be witnessing the whole thing, and when you consider what was on the line?
Hayes, I've been very lucky in my job to cover a lot of cool events. That's the coolest thing I think I may ever experience, because there weren't many Canadians in that building. There was probably, I would guess at the most, maybe 1,500 that were in there, and that's including, myself and our production crew. And we were standing 20 yards away from the penalty spot, watching Maxime Crépeau try to compose himself and breathe, and watching Liam Miller, who after the game, when I saw him outside Canada's dressing room, came out in tears. Even though Canada had won, he looked at me and said, I made all 8 penalty attempts in practice. And Canada won, and he's still going to live with that, because as much as, again, opinions are what they are, and you literally want to go ahead all the time and want to try to understand what an athlete's doing in a particular moment, and to watch them walk up, make that long walk to the penalty spot, put the ball there, and then watching Alphonso Davies, perfect example, knowing, and he said to me after it, I was thinking about that penalty against Belgium, and to put the ball down and to make the kick the way he did. For Jonathan David to start it all off and be the Iceman that everyone always trademarks him to be. And to watch Maxime Crépeau, as I say, compose himself, make a stop after stop. And then to see Ismail Kone, who lost his position, his starting position in the tournament, who has had discussions with Marsch about how he can grow, and who's just made a big move for him to a big club, Marseille in France, with all the pressure on that moment, just walked up and casually put it in. And it's one of the greatest moments in the Canadian men's program, the greatest moment possibly, and one of the greatest moments in Canadian soccer. It was like you could feel it. You could, like, the nerves. Like, even I was shaking. It was cool. And to see how much it mattered to Venezuela too, to see the energy in that building, how much these fans wanted that win. Venezuela is not a soccer country. They're a baseball country. And yet they desperately wanted the opportunity. And that team was playing well in the group stage to get to their first semifinal in like 13 years. And for it to be Canada, and to see the players afterwards, and this may be the high watermark in Canadian men's soccer. They may never get to a semifinal of a major tournament ever again. And maybe they make it out of the knockout or the group stage in 2026, and maybe they make a push. Perhaps the States has gone the furthest of a CONCACAF nation and gone to the quarterfinals. No one's gone further. Maybe Canada gets there, but that might be the high watermark for this program. And to be there and to see the players and to see even Jesse Marsch, 6th game in charge, doing that, kind of realizing what it meant, that was pretty cool.
Yep, absolutely. It's going to be a big one tomorrow. It'll be an electric atmosphere down there. Of course, you can watch it on TSN right here on TSN Radio as well. And he is Matthew Scianitti. He'll be on the scene, full coverage, pre-game, during the game, post-game, the whole nine. So enjoy it, Matthew, and we appreciate you doing this today. We'll do it again soon.
Appreciate it, guys.
There he is, Matthew Scianitti. Yeah, I can't wait for the match tomorrow night. It is really amazing. Like, again, on ESPN, just on their soccer page. And it's Spain, France, two of the powerhouses of world football. Always have been, always will be. Kickoff at 3 p.m. tomorrow. And then at 8 p.m. is Argentina versus Canada.
Wild.
Yeah, it's Spain, France, Argentina, Canada. That's who's playing tomorrow. It's pretty cool.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's a really incredible story. So let's see what comes of it tomorrow, and we'll tee it up all day on the show tomorrow. We'll come back with our best bets, brought to you by FanDuel. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I'm looking at that Euro semi tomorrow. I'm on Spain. I got a little parlay for you. Spain money line. I like Spain tomorrow against France. And yes, both teams score. And I know that's paying big plus money, plus 538, that parlay, because France doesn't score. But they're going to score goals. Like Mbappe is playing.
Yeah.
They have the ability. I saw their coach today say, if you don't like the way we play, go watch something else. Okay. Well, we all know that's not going to happen. I mean, they're in the semis of the Euro. Like, people are going to be watching. But I like Spain tomorrow, and I like both teams to score. I think it's 2-1 Spain.
Okay.
Electric game.
Spain's going to have the ball the whole time, like
Yes.
they always do.
Yeah. France, it's been difficult to penetrate. Defensively, that's the thing. You can look at it both ways. Sure, they don't score, but nobody scores on them.
That's the thing.
And that's why you're getting the odds you're getting. I think it'll change tomorrow.
Okay.
It's going to be a fun match.
Little breakout.
Yeah. Today's Best Bets powered by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and find thousands of ways to play. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 plus and physically located in Ontario. All right, boys. This is a good one. The filter was back. Talked a lot about
Wrestling.
wrestling. Yes.
An
Canada, Argentina
electric
tomorrow.
wrestling filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jay's Giants tomorrow night, too.
It'll be good.
Yeah, it'll be a good one. All right, boys. Good seeing you guys. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. I'm back
Good to be here.
Wednesday.
Yes, beautiful. All right, Al's brother, Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.